Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. My name is Aurel Ciobanu-Dordea. I am the Director in charge of implementation and support to the Member States in the Department of the European Commission responsible for environmental policies. And I will be the moderator of this morning plenary session. And before thanking the panelists of this plenary session for their participation, I would like to thank you very much for being with us already in the first day and from the very first moments of this 2018 Inspire conference. Before moving to the morning plenary session, I would like also to thank our main co-hosts and co-organizers of this Inspire conference, which are the Institute Information Flanders of the Flemish region in Belgium, and the GeoNovum, the interministerial coordination and implementation body set up by the Dutch authorities to implement the Inspire directive. Their effort is much welcome, and we are very grateful to them. We are very grateful, however, also to you. You are very important as Inspire community. Some of you might have been with us since many years, since we organize these periodical meetings. Some of them might be new. You are coming from all the member states of the European Union, and we welcome you, but you are coming also from outside the European Union, from the United States to Russia or India, from Barbados to Cameroon or Algeria and Australia. So we welcome you all, and I hope you will have a fruitful few days of exchanges on this market of ideas, and also market for actions and for interactions, which is represented by the Inspire conference, or at least we want these Inspire conferences not to be only simple gathering places, but also places where ideas meet and people congregate in order to do more things and better things for environment, but not only for environment. And I hope we will have today and in the following days opportunities to discuss about the uses of the Inspire system for other areas than environment as well. So I would like to thank very much for the guests of this morning opening plenary. Mr. Steven Vandeput, who is Minister of Defense of Belgium, Mrs. Dorine Burmanje, who is the CEO of the Dutch Cadastre, Land Registry and Mapping Agency, Mr. Piero Bruni, who is the President of the Associazione Lago di Bolsena, and Mr. Maximilian Strotmann, Member of Cabinet of Vice President Andrus Ansip of the European Commission, and your humble servant as well. I am very grateful to the panelists for the fact that they have made time on their busy agendas for being with us today to to tell us about the policy importance, but also the practical uses of Inspire, and how a different wide range of stakeholders, going from local associations to the military in Belgium, and not only in Belgium, but also in other member states, can benefit from Inspire and take an interest in Inspire. So I would like to invite to take the floor Minister Steven Vandeput.
Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the governments of Belgium and the Kingdom of the Netherlands, it is my true honor and pleasure to welcome you all here in Antwerp, one of the finest cities in this part of the world. I can assure you, when you go outside, you talk to somebody who lives in Antwerp, he might even say that you, as a geographical specialist, should know that Antwerp is in fact the center of the world. It's their opinion. This being said, I hope you will all have some free time over the next days. I hear the program is pretty loaded, but to enjoy the vibrant city life. The choice of this venue, this beautiful Congress Center around the Queen Elizabeth Hall where we are in today, proposed by the Agentschap Informatie Vlaanderen and Geonoven, will beyond any doubt have a positive influence on your work during the next days, and I hope that at the end of the week you will return to your countries inspired by all the interesting things you heard and by the beauty of this site and the city. It is a truly pleasure for me to give the introduction speech here at the International Inspire Conference 2018, and I'm delighted to see that you are all, you have turned up in these numbers. As you know, everybody is a sensor, everybody is a mapper, and everything happens somewhere at a location. The geographical dimension in data offers us the possibility to filter, to organize and analyze the given information, and geographic data are therefore increasingly important, but also increasingly accessible in our information society. The geographical dimension is ingrained into more and more applications, making knowledge sharing between different domains and sectors necessary. There is therefore a need for more cooperation, deeper cooperation, and cross-pollination. Since my appointment as Minister of Defense, it has become this more than once crystal clear that within our current society, geographical information is of the utmost importance. Whether it is to localize a terrorist, analyzing the illegal migration routes in Europe, or monitoring the environmental crisis here in Europe, such as the recent bushfires in southern Europe, the need for correct, up-to-date, and interoperable geographical data is unmistakably there. Limits of competences, administrative zones, even national borders should not prevent us from linking, crossing, and analyzing data. Everybody who is present here today understands the importance of access to data and of linking of that data that seem to have little correlation other than mere place, in order to turn this data into useful information. Geo is the glue to bring together the big data. We need to be able to exchange this information quickly, smoothly, and of course also securely, with all those who need it to fulfill its mission in the public interest. This is, as you know, the important role for Inspire. And the implementation of Inspire in Belgium is a good example of the need for cooperation and cross-pollination and its advantages. The Inspire Directive, as such, does not take into account the division of powers within a country. In Belgium, 4 different government levels are separately responsible for the implementation of Inspire, and I will call them out for you. It's the federal government and the Brussels capital, the Flemish and the Walloon region. There is no hierarchy between these levels, and each of these parties is fully and solely responsible for the implementation of Inspire for those areas for which it holds jurisdiction. Therefore, we needed to create a federal coordination where everybody works together to reach this goal and at the same time, along the way, learn from each other. The Inspire Coordination Committee developed the Common Belgium Action Plan 2016-2020 that in effect offers a consolidated roadmap for the better implementation of the Inspire Directive by 2020. Within the federal government, Inspire has also contributed to a positive evolution. There are several key spatial data providers acting at the federal level. In the first place, there is the Belgian National Mapping Agency, or NGI, which explains why I'm here today, as this agency is under my supervision. Further, you have the General Administration of Patrimonial Documentation, and this is the cadastral authority at the Federal Public Service Finance, the DG Statistics, and the Federal Public Service Economy, and several federal scientific institutions such as the Royal Meteorological Institute, the Royal Belgian Institute for Natural Sciences, the Royal Observatory of Belgium, and the Royal Belgian Institute for Space Aeronomy. In addition to these spatial data producers, there are several important spatial data users, both on the federal and the interregional level. Not easy. But as a result of the INSPIRE implementation, the Federal Geo Platform was created to find, access, and use the geospatial resources owned and managed at the federal level. The Federal Geoportal geo.be is the gateway and the single gateway to the single access point for those federal spatial datasets and services covering the national territory. NGI manages this platform, including the organizational aspects, as they are key for its sustainable maintenance. Back to back, a geo-broker approach has been initiated. And this geo-broker approach of the NGI includes the provision of technical expertise to partners, trainings and technical workshops, and the development of technical guidelines and recommendations on INSPIRE compliance procedures for data and services. NGI also validates the INSPIRE compliance of the metadata, spatial data and services, and develops and hosts the platform, giving access to geographical data and services of partners who do not have the internal resources or the expertise required in this field. Other results include the creation and maintenance of a single centralized search service containing the federal geographic information and associated services. The impact of this ongoing effort on the federal spatial datasets and services is significant, as their visibility and accessibility in the European context has improved a lot, thus also facilitating the use of these authoritative geographical data covering the national territory for the European authorities. One thing that our federal INSPIRE community has learned over the years is the importance of the human factor. The cooperation among the federal partners with common objectives has fostered dialogue and improved knowledge between them. The considerable work of inventorying the federally managed geographical information and the associated services has led to a common rediscovery of all those realizations. In general, this cooperation has created the opportunity to learn from each other. The sharing of this geographic data and services in an interoperable manner facilitates their integration and increases their potential for exploitation. Validation of metadata, geographic data and services improves the quality of these components and encourages harmonizations to improve their use. 10 years ago, the federal government understood that better use of geographical data will lead to better decisions and more efficient use of resources, and therefore the INSPIRE transposition into federal law was an opportunity for the government to stretch the scope of this law beyond INSPIRE and to broaden the role of the National Geographic Institute. The platform with INSPIRE-themed datasets is the starting point and will soon be enriched with other federal geospatial datasets outside of the INSPIRE scope. And why, you would ask? Well, because we believe that smooth and easy access to spatial data is crucial in our constantly evolving society. The pressure on government departments to prove their relevance and justify the use of millions of taxpayers' money will not diminish over the coming years. On the contrary, I would say. I would like to challenge all government agencies that are here today to show how improved cooperation and better use of data can lead to better and more efficient decision-making. And I would also like to invite these public institutions to think out of the box and to question their own role. A nice example is this of the GeoOptiFed1 project of the NGI in its new broker role. In response to a need at the federal level, confirmed through a market analysis, commercial navigation software and street name data was produced and made accessible to all interested federal partners. This led to a more efficient use of both human and economic resources of the federal government, all thanks to Inspire. Looking at the future, there is a strong need to build further on the achievements concerning the federal spatial data infrastructure and the geobroker role. We need to keep in mind two things. One, provide data sets that are fit for use, fit for purpose, data sets that the user really can use. It seems simple, but I think this is the core business. Two, let's try to collect once and use many times. Hence, promoting data integration is the next logical step. We should gather all geospatial data in one place that is easy to find for the end users. The federal platform that has been created in the framework of Inspire can therefore also be used to non-federal or regional data sets covering the entire Belgian territory. With this, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to end my introductory remarks. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Minister, for outlining a challenge for the future period about the better use of data and commenting on the major needs in the following years, but also thank you for talking us through the cooperation challenges. We live, in a way, in an exploded world where we are more and more fragmented, but as in the Belgian example, it came out, cooperation and compromising in order to find solution and to deliver on the expectations of the citizens and on the needs of the society is crucial. And I think you have outlined a very inspiring example that has maybe not everything to do with the Inspire directive, but with the spirit of compromise of the Belgians. So thank you very much. I would like now to invite Mrs. Dorine Burmanje to take the floor.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the kind invitation to speak here today at the Inspire Conference 2018 in Antwerp. As co-chair of the United Nations Global Geospatial Information Management Initiative, also known as UNGGIM, I would like to take the opportunity to focus on the relevance of cooperation and information sharing. And when I'm talking about cooperation, I'm proud that this year's Inspire Conference is being organized by the European Commission in partnership with Belgium and the Netherlands, a cross-border cooperation. I'm impressed by the place where we are gathered here today, and when looking outside, colorful flamingos are witnessing the progress of our meetings. I took the wrong entrance this morning and had also a good discussion with these flamingos. And abundant wildlife and green gardens are inviting us to enter their world. Nature nurtures the soul, inspires and connects, as has been proclaimed on the website of the Convention Center. So it's important to cherish these green spaces and be keen on the preservation of nature, wildlife, and existing balances in our fragile environment. We all know the environment is subject to changes and new records. We had a soaring long and hot summer all over Europe. Good for ice cream consumption, swimming and days at the beach, but with severe consequences like the fierce fires in Portugal and Greece. Together with historically low water levels, lost crops and shortage of natural resources. And all those developments damage wildlife and nature in general, affecting us all directly. You know, you have experienced it yourself, a change in environment. It's this environment that was in essence the driver for Inspire. More than 10 years ago, Inspire had already the ambition to create a European spatial data infrastructure for the purpose of EU environmental policies. It did so by sharing environmental spatial information among public sector organizations, facilitate public access to spatial information across Europe, and assist in policy making across boundaries. Now, we see that the goals of the Inspire Directive have become a substantial part of the current work program of the European Commission. And there are other agendas as well that urge for action in the field of the environment and climate change related developments. At a global level, we see also goals and frameworks that take the environment as a perspective. There are the Sustainable Development Goals, as agreed upon in the 2030 Agenda, and think also about the Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, and the Paris Agreement on Climate Change can be mentioned here as well. All these initiatives are key points of reference for a sustainable future, the future of our planet and the future of our children. And Inspire ignited a spark already since the directive entered into force in 2007. Goals, agreements, frameworks, what they have in common is that they need a vision, don't come overnight, and are the result of dialogue. And it's dialogue that feeds into shaping them further. A dialogue not only on a European, but also on a global level. Ladies and gentlemen, when talking about this global level, I like to tell you about the UN GGIM initiative. I like to share some of my observations and will project them on making undertakings as Inspire work. So first, GGIM, that's the United Nations Initiative on Global Geospatial Information Management. Last August, the annual meeting of the Committee of Experts, number 8 in RAW, was held at the UN headquarters in New York. It assembled a lot of people. How did it start? Established by the UN's Economic and Social Council, GGIM started relatively small in 2011. It assembled specially mapping and cadastral agencies from member states from over the world, talking about the relevance of geospatial information. This is embodied in its message. Everything happens somewhere. Is it teenage pregnancies, earthquake, floods, pollutions? Everything happens somewhere. The UN was convinced that geospatial information needed an intergovernmental approach. So, it connected the global agenda of sustainable development to a structure of member states and experts that could provide direction and prepare an ambitious agenda. Since 2011, a lot has happened. I would like to reflect on that and share some observations with you. In the first place, I observe a growing interest in the initiative. Currently, beside the global structure, regional committees were established focusing on the mere specific challenges and opportunities of a region. So in Europe, we have UN GGIM Europe, showcasing the European perspective. And we don't do this alone, but in close cooperation with Eurostat, the Commission, and others. On a global scale, GGIM-specific private sector and academic networks have been erected. This brings essential expertise regarding innovation, use, and research on board and increases commitment to the initiative. During the first few years, the initiative has expanded from merely public sector parties to bigger involvement of the private sector and academic world. Last month in New York, I saw more representatives from these sectors. But even more relevant is the growing interest by other communities. You might wonder why, but the reason is not so strange. From the beginning on and onwards, the annual agenda of GGIM contains the integration of geospatial data with other data sets, like statistical data. Over the recent years, the agenda has broadened. So the importance of remote sensing evolved. The marine environment was included, land administration and registration of land rights were added, and legal frameworks were tabled. evidence that geospatial information embraces inclusiveness and sustainable development in an environmental, social, and economic sense. Close to my heart are land rights for all, a global issue. 70% of the globe doesn't have a proper land registration. That means no or insecure access to a home, loans, and economic prosperity. Tabled at GGIM, the sense of urgency for lowering this percentage together is key. I experienced that geospatial information is not a solitary exercise. There's room for different communities advocating the bigger picture of sustainable development, a development that we should encourage. My second observation of this year's GGIM meeting is different from the meetings I chaired or attended before. Usually, a lot of sheer hard work went into the formal meetings, tabling, in fact, the items on the agenda. Examples of those are a framework on geospatial information management, initiated together with the World Bank, and a framework on land administration. However, this year, I learned more from the side events, broader representation with a healthy and strong participation of women and young generations, practical examples, understandable user cases, spontaneous discussions, and inspirational talks. I experienced belief, simplicity, and eagerness to share. That should be promoted more. It's all about inspiration, as you know. My third observation refers to the influence of technology and dialogue. In New York, the transformational role of technology has become apparent. To handle global challenges affecting our daily environment, evidence-based and informed decision-making is key. This is embodied in the Sustainable Development Goals and in the Paris Agreement. Geospatial information plays an important part in the monitoring of the progress being made. But evidence-based decision-making is also needed in the rapid digitalization of our society, provided overview and insight of the real situation thanks to 3D dimensional developments and stronger visualization, for instance. Enable sound decision-making. But the pace in which these innovations can flourish is dependent on the ability to cooperate between the private sector, the research community, and the public sector. So it's important to connect and be involved. I experienced that the presence and growing participation at GGIM events supports leadership to bring informed decision-making further and making it happen. And that's achieved by opening the dialogue, by talking about goals and frameworks. And then you hear interesting things from around the world, positive results. And here I like to refer to Inspire. Within GGIM, Inspire is regarded a relevant framework. It's admired by many around the world. It's seen as a resilient digital network, bringing data together, offering overview and insight in things that matter. By focusing on the progress that's being made, an incentive to move forward with Inspire is given, instead of focusing sometimes too easy on things that didn't work out. The same applies to frameworks and definitions of data sets within GGIM. Let me give you an example of the fundamental geospatial data sets that were on the agenda this year in New York by the European Regional Committee of GGIM. Extensive dialogue resulted in 14 defined themes, like addresses, geographical names, buildings and settlements, elevation and depth, just to mention a few. These 14 themes contribute to the measurement, monitoring, and management of sustainable development in a consistent way over time. This facilitates evidence-based decision-making. During the process leading to these results, critical questions were raised and strong discussions were held. That took time. Time well spent on essential dialogue. Dialogue being an undeniable part of the valuable results. Next steps will focus on the communication of these themes. So the process of dialogue continues. It's the process itself that is a substantial part of the solution. Another positive observation regarding the Inspire process is the fact that the INSPIRE directive leveraged national awareness of spatial data frameworks. The sparks ignited by the INSPIRE directive create a dialogue within European countries that's also called valuable progress. Let us continue this dialogue, increasing awareness and showing leadership to get decision makers from different sectors involved. Keep in mind that the INSPIRE and GGIM community embrace, in essence, the same goal: to ensure a sustainable future for our environment, our planet, our children. Everything happens somewhere. Let us make things happen with our data and cooperation. Let's make it work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Burmanje, for bringing us the global perspective, the wider perspective in which we work in Europe, and we see a certain identity of topics and the convergence of agendas. But also thank you for your reflections about the wider purposes for which we work in this area, and we work under the aegis of the INSPIRE directive and of the INSPIRE system, bringing sustainable solutions, bringing sustainable development, preparing sound decisions which need to be evidence-based, need to be informed. I am sure we will have countless opportunities to discuss about these, also in more specific contexts, in the following few days. I would like now to invite Mr. Piero Bruni, the president of the Associazione Lago di Bolsena, to take the floor.
Good morning to everybody. I come from Lake Bolsena in Italy. I have the honor of having been invited here because I can personally witness how Lake Bolsena was almost a century ago. This because I am 91 years old and I can testify to the many errors that have been made in lake management and how important were the battles and the results obtained by the Citizen Association. First of all, I would like to introduce you to Lake Bolsena just at the moment of a sunset. The lake is surrounded by several historical villages of Middle Ages. Here are 3 examples. There are two islands that are volcanic craters. The lake is located in a volcanic caldera. It has a surface area of 114 square kilometers and has a depth of 150 meters. As all volcanic lakes, it has a very small catchment area of rainfall. Consequently, its emissary river takes 300 years to flow out the volume of the lake. Actually, everything that enters in the lake remains there forever. Hopefully not in solution, but steadily fixed at the bottom of the lake. Bolsena is a beautiful lake, but as you can realize, it's a sensitive and vulnerable lake. When I was a boy, the lake water was drinkable. My uncle worked on the Bolsena Island. We used to go there every morning. There were no motorboats, and while I rowed, my uncle fished. Along the way, we drank water from the lake. When on the island, at lunchtime, we ate the freshly caught fish. I was allowed to drink a glass of white local wine. Actually, it was half a bottle. At the beginning of the century, Marta was and still is a village of fishermen. There were no refrigerator, and as you can see from the picture, the water entered in the cellars of the houses, where the fish were kept alive and sold alive directly to the public. This old slide was used in school to illustrate to young people what the life was like before the war. In the houses, there were no water. The women took the water from the village fountain, carried in jugs, elegantly balanced on their head. Far from the village, rainwater was somehow collected. There were no Christian scraps. All the remains were given to pigs and the hens. There were no toilets, and everything was thrown out of the window in the ground behind the house. Flies were billions. In this type of civilization, the effect of man on the lake was practically non-existing. Then the war came. After the war, the network of drinking water was built. The sewers dumped the human load of 20,000 inhabitants directly into the lake. There has been a rapid urban development. Intensive agriculture has been encouraged, which has polluted the lake with fertilizer and chemical. More than 1,000 water wells have been drilled in the hydrological basin upstream the lake, thus reducing still further the flow rate of the emissary. In a few years, the human load of the lake has gone from non-existent to very significant. In the 60s, a disastrous project came. The National Electricity Company, in anticipation of the construction of a nearby nuclear plant, decided to use the lake as storage tanks. It was planned to use excess electricity production to pump water from the murky Tiber River into Lake Bolsena so as to produce additional hydroelectric energy when the demand was high. A 4-meter level variation was planned for the Bolsena Lake. It was exactly this project which inspired citizens to form the first committees for the protection of the lake. The voluntary associations organized a large national press campaign against the plan. The government was forced to submit the project to the Institute of Ecosystem Study of Verbania Pallanza, which was in charge of the study of lakes of northern Italy. Following their evaluation, the government stopped the project, despite the fact that work had already begun. In the meantime, the project of lake pollution had become pressing. The environmental volunteers obtained the funding for the sewage collector and its purification plant, but they were excluded from the project by the political parties, which, after having sharing the contracts among themselves, constructed an incomplete sewage ring around the lake. Citizen science is a recent term, but it has a long history around Lake Bolsena. In the year 2000, since no study of the lake were made after 1960, the Lake Bolsena Association collected somehow the necessary equipment in order to conduct a study on its own. Having no funding, the association asked the public administration to lend their multiparametric probe. In addition, a friendly agreement was made with the Institute of Pallanza for technical support and chemical analysis. From the year 2000 up to today, the association made over 150 multiparametric logs and made 2 withdrawals of pelagic water samples during the period of mixing and maximum stratification of the lake. The Institute of Pallanza made about 20 chemical analyses on each water sample. 7 depth, twice a year during 18 years makes a total of about 5,000 analyses at top professional level. A few days ago, the data has been published in the International Scientific Journal Limnologica, thus concluding a cycle of 18 years of monitoring. The work shows that the eutrophication of the lake is underway and that the situation could worsen in the future, also due to the increase of global temperature. Among the activity of the voluntary association, it is worth mentioning the school education in lake ecology, which was extended to all 850 middle school children in the basin. Among other activities, they sampled the plankton with a net and then they examined it under microscopes. Also, it is worth mentioning the contrast to high enthalpy geothermal plants, which would pollute the lake with arsenic. The European Community has made many directives for the protection of the lake, but the Italian public administration seems not interested in their application, as well as the participation of citizens. Transparency is absent. The involvement of citizens is seen as a means and not as a resource. But the association do their best, keeping citizens informed by means of their blogs. I am here to share our experience of how a sitting association was able to construct a unique long-time data set. Without our work, no information would be available on the eutrophication of the lake. In order to further develop our monitoring in the coming years, we need help and feedback. So far, we managed to carry on without having a multiparametric probe and the related equipment of our own property. But it is not certain that this external support will last much longer. I am here also to share our experience on the difficulties that a group of informed citizens encounters in defending its environment. We have understood that without the pressure of the European community, the lake protection is not going to be done. In conclusion, our hope is that the European community adopt Lake Bolsena as its symbol for environmental protection and will help the citizen by pressing local administration in applying the pertinent laws, in premise the Water Framework Directive. We trust that this will be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruni, for bringing here a practical example of an association which was indeed built to enable, as you said, a data set on the eutrophication of the lake, but moreover, thank you for bringing here an example of one of the beneficiaries for which we congregate here and we work here. Because ultimately I think we work for delivering better decisions for the benefit of citizens, of communities, of our societies. And we hear also your other call to the European community or maybe to the European Commission. We know you also from other instances as a fighter for enforcement of certain environmental rules, and no doubt this is not our last contact. But I would like now to give the floor to Max Strotmann, who, as I mentioned, is a member of the cabinet of Vice President Andrus Ansip of the European Commission, in charge of digital issues. And we are very grateful to Max for being able to be with us this morning.
Aurel, thank you. Good morning. Good morning, everybody, colleagues on the panel, distinguished guests here. When the colleagues from DG Environment asked me to come here and take Mr. Ansip's place, I thought actually, wow, that's cool. That's a simple task, and one where I can wholeheartedly, but very simple, say, thanks a lot, guys and girls. We admire what you do. We encourage you to continue. We feel totally in tune from a digital perspective what you're doing, and we need your help to continue being able to do so. That's what I thought was a message, and then a bit of clapping, maybe, hopefully. And then I go sit there. Thank you. And then we continue with cool projects like we just heard from the global level, from the national level, from the very local level, and the discussions and so on over. Okay, then Hugo, whom you may know and who is here, told me, no. We need something, it's simple, he said, we need something visionary on digital, on tech. Oh gosh. Okay, something visionary on tech and global, and then everybody thinks about, you know, guys in T-shirts and going out with envelopes and saying a next little thing here, and speaking about blockchain and all the funky things that may come, tech and gadgets, and it's all very cool. Okay, Hugo, I'm a bureaucrat. I'm a colleague from the European Commission. These gadgetary, funky, visionary things are not really so much us. And also, too easily, I think when we say visionary, then we are in the tech, in the gadgets area. And from my team, from Mr. Ansip's cabinet, from the colleagues in the Commission, we think that, I mean, it's all very nice and super interesting, and I love it and try it out, and my son loves it too. But this is, the pure digital tools is not really the thing, the aim in itself, but it's how we use them. What we make use about in a world that we just have heard that, like never before, is understanding that nobody lives alone. Not in my city, not in my community, not in my region, not in my country, not in my continent, because the challenges are increasingly, have always been global, but now it has become visible, and so let's use the digital tools for that. So I thought, what I tried to do is, Hugo, sorry, nothing new here, but I tried to say, why I think that the INSPIRE framework, your action, our common action, is something that I find truly visionary from the beginning, and that in my view remains visionary. And I try to do it on 2 points, that is data, not surprisingly, and tools or systems, also not surprisingly. So let's tone down the visionary stuff, and I try to see whether I can make the link, and you tell me afterwards, maybe over coffee, not publicly here, please, whether it has worked or not. Okay, first point, data. Came up already, the minister spoke about it, actually all the colleagues spoke about it, data access and data sharing. And not to lose time on this one, to say very simple, we think we have collectively a huge problem. We think that our approach, certainly in Europe, also beyond, is too restrictive. There is too much blocking. There is too much hesitation about access to sharing of data. Okay, excitement about abuse of data. I'm worried about my personal data. We need data protection. That's a given. This is something that we would not negotiate away. But while we need to ensure and make everything to protect personal data and other sensitive data, we think at the same time we need to allow what in the jargon, in the political jargon, we call the free flow, the free flowing of data across sectors, across entities, across borders, internationally. Okay, the tools, you know, the GDPR, lots of excitement. First we want it, then we get worried about it, and we say, oh, it's very complicated. But this is something that is doable, we are deeply convinced, and that is happening. And that is something that we cannot negotiate away. We have other sort of related laws in the negotiation process with lots of difficulties with member states in particular, if you think about the e-privacy regulation on telecommunications. But there is another element that for us was very important, the so-called free flow of data, and I think you have heard about it before, where we say you cannot force in a common European legal environment people to say, you must store your data in this place or that place, because this will not help us to make the best of this data. This will not help us to save costs and improve services. This also will not help, in particular, European smaller companies to compete successfully with global players. Okay, free flow of data agreed at European level, and I hope we can start implementing it as from the end of this year. This means in the future you can store your data in accordance with European rules all across Europe and access it. The other big element in this area, data access, data, as you would probably expect it, is INSPIRE and is the Public Sector Information Directive, where we proposed an update, where we said, let's go yet a step further. Let's go this step further and include more data sets. Let's include dynamic data sets into it. Let's go further with the entities that are covered by it, and the pushback you can expect is huge. Here we need your support. Please also stand up, explain to the government officials, but also to the experts and the companies what you can win and benefit from sharing data, from allowing more open data in the public environment, and even maybe what we call the reverse PSI, community use, public interest in private data or data held by the private sector, by all these sensors that are around us in energy, in mobility, and so on, that are increasingly important for you and for us and for our policy making. When I said it's too restrictive, it's too much blocking, we call, in particular, the big companies and the governments to say, experiment more. Get out of your shell, share and try to engage with startups, with researchers, to experiment what you can do with your data, and we are convinced that in the majority of cases it will come back to you as a positive benefit and you will be richer in a global sense than you were before. This is the basis for innovation, not hoarding it, but sharing it, experimenting, playing with it carefully, but do the step out. Everybody gets hooked up about artificial intelligence as the next big thing and so on, that is already evolving there. Forget artificial intelligence if we don't ensure a better sharing and access rules for data. And this applies to industry and the big companies in Europe and in particular, and also government. And maybe a side point before I move to the system point is access to data and sharing of data is something that we are convinced is inherently good for public control. This is a new means, this is the better means than we ever had to take the public action to account. Accountability, inject accountability, testing possibilities, and participation of a broader public into the decision-making processes. And we think that this is very close to what INSPIRE is about. Okay, second point, tools systems, interoperability, naturally you may say as well, because these things are of course needed to make data flow, and they are of course embedded in the whole Inspire legislative setups. We need common rules, and I know that there are colleagues here from Digit, the department, the in-house, this is sort of the partner department to Flanders information systems within the Commission, who work with you and with the broad community on the European interoperability framework. That's an example. It is also, just if you allow me a bracket, for example, negotiating a better copyright reform for Europe, but this is really a can of worms that maybe we keep closed here, and we can discuss privately outside if you want. Common rules, we said we need, a common legal framework for Europe. Let's regulate problems and differences and difficulties away, and let's agree on common rules and common tools, such as in the Inspire environment, but a step further, for example, in supercomputing. Let's give Europe the capacity to crunch data in big numbers and fast. And for this, we don't need a supercomputer here and one there and one in my country and one in my region, in my city and so on. We can't afford this, and we don't need it. But we need shared supercomputing facilities all over Europe that you and your researchers and the public side and startups and industry can tap in. Europe only provides, I think, a fifth or so of global supercomputing capacity, but consumes more than a third. Well, let's invest commonly in this, wise investment, I think. The same is for a European science cloud infrastructure that the colleagues from DG RTD and JRC who are here are also working on. And a strong, important final point from our side on the tools and systems side is reuse what you have. Let's not reinvent all the time similar approaches for a new policy area. And we are, the Commission and the colleagues in the Commission, and I guess in the government level it's pretty much the same, we are guilty of that ourselves. Because we think in our area, and we don't see the connections, we don't see that we can reuse it and we can cut costs and make it more efficient and offer new data usage tools before. So on this side, for example, I thank you also for mentioning the once-only principle that we think is an essential tool for the future. Keep the data where it is, reuse it where you can with the permission, if it's personal data of me and you, but reuse it across public activity wherever you can. And of course, all of this has to be safe and secure. So IoT certification, security certification is something that we are just now starting to negotiate with the Parliament and the Council. Let's help us also, please help us here to keep simple and operational tools. Maybe allow me, because also you mentioned, Dorine, very much the global framework on this, that when we speak about the digital single market, it sounds sometimes, and it appears in particular with our American friends, that this is sort of a fortress digital Europe. It is not. From the beginning, the international aspects were built in our project for the digital single market. We think that Europe cannot and should not do it alone. We think that we need to reach out and maintain the link and a stretched hand to our international partners. And of course, this is Japan and Korea and the US and Canada and all our traditional economic partners and allies. And you see it, for example, in the adequacy decision with Japan on personal data transfers, saying, essentially, the Japanese environment is the same like Europe's. We check it, we have the assurances, let data flow between the two regions. And we work on the same for Korea and with some Latin American countries. And the other aspect that is very, very close to the heart of my commissioner is injecting digital into development cooperation. Helping to build high-performance networks, high-performance computing, broadband infrastructure, but in particular also cooperation in e-government and in startups and industry. So the international aspect, we are totally with you, is something that is built in for us in our project. So this philosophy of the digital single market and its link to Inspire, if I may sum it up or try to sum it up, is something we believe wholeheartedly in a distributed setup, not a centralized one. We don't need one solution, but we need many, many local solutions but that are joined up. And I think the example from the lake in Italy of local effects and local needs that are unique to this place, but where you need to link up to others in order to support each other and learn from each other and work with each other is perfect. So local needs, my solutions, but not in isolation as an island, but hooked up and linked in. And by this, we think we are maintaining sort of a safety principle for any future use cases, that we don't need to restart the whole thing again, but that we can just open a new era of cooperation, of data flows, of systems integration at low cost and quickly. Okay, lots of bureaucratic words and lots of directives and stuff and so on. In the beginning we said, I think this is very visionary what you are doing. Maybe a final word. I think that on this visionary, the gadgets block our sight, and the e-government, the public sector at large, is sort of the poor kid in all of this discussion. Everybody gets hooked up about tech and big industries and the big platforms and the consumer products and so on. But the transformatory potential of government, of public action, is overlooked. And we think it is essential, if we manage to wisely, quickly, integrated, transform government and the public sector, I think we will win the battle for the good in digital, in government, in health, in transport, in the environment, whatever you're doing. And data, interoperability, cross-border are all key aspects to this. In the government circles, people spoke about e-government, electronic, making a paper an electronic document, one step. Then they spoke about digital government, making profoundly digitizing processes, re-engineering behind. This is still much talked about. Now I hear a lot about intelligent, about I-government. Sounds, again, like a gadget, but it is intelligent government like making use of geospatial data. And if you shorten it and you say I-gov, you could also say it's inspired gov, no? Inspired government. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Max, for your inspiring intervention. I think we can join you very quickly on a number of messages that you have addressed to us. And in particular, we recognize the truthfulness of what you said about the need to dismantle barriers to the free flow of data. And we know that this is one of the most resilient features that hamper innovation in Europe. And we are in the business of fighting with these barriers since at least 10 years, since we have the Inspire directive. Unfortunately, this is a very fertile field. And we will be in this business, but with resilience ourselves in order to dismantle barriers. And we hear you also when you were speaking about the poor kid, which is e-government. Indeed, a lot of people focus on consumers and products for consumers. We focus a lot on personal data protection. This is very important for our societies and for our markets as well, but much less focus is, the focus is not excessive on consumers and on personal data protection. There is too little focus on e-government and managing data for public interest. And I think these are very important messages on which we need to reflect and to discuss not only in the coming days, but also in the coming longer period, in the coming months and years. And we hope to continue to be able to work together with you and with the political leadership, not only in the European Commission, but also across the European Union. But it is important also in the European Commission to be able to work together across the sectoral delimitations with colleagues from different departments of the Commission, and I would like to pay tribute to them, to those from other departments of the Commission than the department in charge of environmental policy, who are joining us today and in the following days. And this is just congregating for an event, which is this Inspire conference, but we are working together also besides these events and between these events in order to dismantle these barriers. Thank you to you all, and we look forward to work with you as well as we look forward to work with our member states in a cooperative spirit and also service-minded. Let me say maybe a little bit more bureaucratic, truly bureaucratic words than Max managed to say in his very interesting and appealing intervention. But I would like, even in a more bureaucratic and conventional way, to reflect a little bit together with you about what we have done very shortly, but in a significant period of 10 years, and reflect as well on a number of challenges that lie ahead of us. More than 10 years have elapsed since we have agreed that we need Inspire, a digital infrastructure in Europe allowing us to share across all levels of government and across borders the information that we need to protect our environment. In the same period, we have witnessed an amazing transformation of our societies as the digital technology to connect us all is now literally at our fingertips. Getting access to and sharing information has become for many of us part of our daily lives. It all looks relatively simple nowadays, yet we should ask ourselves the question about the extent to which those technological achievements help us in facing the challenges in front of us today. And some of them have been mentioned here. Some others will be discussed today and in the following few days. The impact of a changing climate, the degradation of our ecosystems, mobility issues pushing us towards gridlock, the depletion of our natural resources, growing challenges in the management of waste, the sustainability of our agriculture, the quality of the air we breathe, migration challenges as well. Perhaps at the same time we need also to reflect together and to work together on what we can do in order to give a better use to these technologies in order to address more efficiently, more effectively these challenges and to produce changes that try to stop some of the challenges, to slow them down, or maybe even we manage to reverse them. This conference is one of those moments where we can do this. We can take stock, present our ideas, learn from each other, and find the inspiration to do more and perhaps better. Looking at the agenda of the conference and thinking of the challenges we face, we are pleased to see so many sessions on using information covered by Inspire for a wide range of applications. Management of natural resources, spatial planning, energy, smart cities, transport and mobility, monitoring legal compliance, agriculture. To make these applications work, digital technologies are crucial. So why would we need Inspire as those technologies are available out there? Indeed, relative to the speed in which digital technology evolved, the 10 years of Inspire would place it, if not in the digital Stone Age, maybe in the Middle Ages. At least if it really were not more than a digital infrastructure. Yet, Inspire does not entail only high-speed networks, large computing power, and digital clouds. These are indispensable, but not sufficient. Down on earth and at its core are the people on which it depends to take the right decisions to make this sharing of information work and deliver societal benefits, deliver also individual benefits. Until perhaps artificial intelligence will replace this in the future, or parts of this in the future, it is again encouraging to find so many sessions and presentations in this conference dedicated to the collaboration across policies, organizations, and programs. What else is needed to make Inspire work, or work better? Looking at our conference agenda, we see that a substantial part of the sessions is about how we use technologies and standards to make Inspire work. Clearly, without these, it would not be possible for Inspire to deliver. The secret behind making Inspire work lies here, in the collaboration amongst users and producers, collaboration between different stakeholders and policymakers. This is very important. The dialogue between policymakers and those who contribute to standards, application, and technology providers. I would like also to share with you, in a few words, an outlook on the road ahead of us. What should we do in Inspire for the years to come? I started by saying that Inspire was adopted over a decade ago as a directive to support environmental policies. However, from the onset, it was clear in our minds that sharing the information covered by this directive would benefit much more than environment alone. We see it in the applications presented at our conferences over the years and in the presence of many colleagues from other Commission departments. Already today, we find references to Inspire in a wide range of rules adopted by the European Union and Commission initiatives. Here, the bureaucratic streak is very strong. For instance, the directives on maritime spatial planning, on intelligent transport systems, on the deployment of broadband networks, to give just a few examples. More is yet to come. Earlier this year, the Commission has adopted proposals yet to be endorsed by the Parliament and by the Council, by the Member States, for regulations on the Common Agricultural Policy, on the European Union Space Programme, and in the area of climate change, on land use and forestry. These are all relying on Inspire. Inspire explicitly underpins the data sharing requirements of these instruments. Let us also take a look at the initiative for building a European data economy as part of the digital single market strategy. This initiative entails a new proposal for the reuse of public sector information directive. As many of you know, this PSI directive, which I think was mentioned here before, set the terms and conditions under which Inspire information can be reused by the private sector and the public one. But do you also know that a few years ago, the G8 countries, the group of the 8 biggest economies in the world, adopted a charter on open data with, as one of its actions, to release free of any obstacles data of high value for improving our democracies and innovation. This charter, among the highest value data sets, we find geospatial data, data on energy and environment, transport and infrastructure, as well as Earth observation data. So we have reached at the level where there can be political attention to what we are doing and to our area. And there is also political expectation about what we are doing and what we can deliver. All these data above rely on Inspire. The new PSI directive proposal will specifically address such high-value data sets. Therefore, here again, we will be collaborating with you, with our colleagues, to further remove even more some of the obstacles remaining to the wider use of data. I should, of course, not forget to mention the environmental legislation. We are relying firmly on the role played by Inspire in our activities and in our priorities in the area of environmental policy, when we think and when we work about strengthening environmental compliance. This, we have adopted recently the Environmental Compliance Assurance Action, which relies explicitly on Inspire. And we will continue in the following years to do so. Sometimes, over the past decade, we face the question, who are the users of this Inspire infrastructure, and what do they want? If we would compare it with the transport network, we could ask ourselves, what good would it be if we have no goods to transport, if we do not have services to deliver these goods to the clients, if we do not deliver the product that the client needs, or if the client cannot afford, for financial reasons or for other reasons, to get to these goods. In order to improve this situation and the functioning of this network, this transport network, we will have the opportunity during this conference to present a new EU-level Inspire geoportal, the online shop where our clients should be able to find the goods and services they need. But the shop will be there. It depends on us to populate it with the goods and services which can be afforded by the clients. As we in this panel try to make clear, the demand is there and growing with potentially huge benefits down the line for all. For some reason, let me conclude with this, the Inspire community has adopted as its unofficial symbol the pineapple. I do like pineapples, yet personally, a few years ago, when I was beginning my path into understanding how Inspire works and what this community is, I compared Inspire with a coconut. Hard to crack, but once you crack it, it's so sweet. A lot of perfume and, yeah, good for thirst. I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that we will continue to crack the coconuts. We will continue to work together in order to dismantle barriers and to solve difficulties in the following days and also in the following months and years, with a clear conscience that we can deliver concrete things that attract businesses, economic operators, so are marketable, are interesting from an economic perspective, but also deliver the public goods expected for by our societies, and public goods that are also expected by our political decision makers. Ladies and gentlemen, let me thank my co-panelists for today's participation, their participation in this panel, and for their patience. I would like to thank you very much for your patience and interest in participating in this conference, and I hope you will enjoy the debates. As we are running out of time, I'm afraid we will not have a debate related to this morning opening panel, but I am certain, and we will be available to you in the workshops that will continue after the lunch break. Thank you very much and enjoy the conference.